40 wild facts you didn't know about Boston. Did you know that the deadliest flood in American history wasn't caused by water, but by 2.3 million gallons of molasses that exploded through the streets of Boston at 35 miles per hour, killing 21 people? That one of the greatest art heists in history remains unsolved after 35 years, with $500 million worth of masterpieces still missing. And that America's oldest public park has been the site of public hangings, duels, and British Army encampments. Boston isn't just colonial history and clam chowder. It's the birthplace of American independence, a city terrorized by a serial strangler, home to the most cursed baseball team in history, and the site of the largest and most expensive highway project ever built. Today, we're bringing you 40 facts that will completely change the way you see America's walking city. What's up? Welcome back to Urban Vault. If you're new here, we explore the hidden side of the world's most iconic cities. Before we start, you know the drill. Subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss any videos. Now let's get into it, starting with number 40. 40. The city built on a hill. Of garbage, modern Boston is literally built on trash. The original Shawmut Peninsula was only 783 acres, connected to the mainland by a narrow strip of land called the Neck that flooded at high tide. Today, Boston covers over 48 square miles. The difference? Starting in the 1630s, colonists began filling in the surrounding tidal flats with garbage, gravel, and soil cut from Boston's 3 original hills. The entire Back Bay neighborhood, home to some of America's most expensive real estate, sits on landfill that was once the Charles River. 39. The Forgotten Massacre before the massacre. Before the Boston Massacre of 1770, there was another deadly confrontation. On February 22, 1770, an 11-year-old boy named Christopher Sider was shot and killed by a British customs officer during a protest. His funeral procession drew over 2,000 mourners, the largest gathering in colonial Boston's history. Just 11 days later, British soldiers fired into a crowd, killing 5 colonists in what would become known as the Boston Massacre. Sider is often called the first casualty of the American Revolution. 38. The Hanging Tree. For over 200 years, a massive elm tree stood in Boston Common known as the Great Elm. Beneath its branches, Quakers were hanged for their religious beliefs, including Mary Dyer in 1660. Pirates were executed there. During the Revolutionary War, British soldiers hanged American deserters from its limbs. The tree survived until 1876 when a storm finally brought it down. A plaque now marks the spot where countless people met their end. 37. The Cursed Ground. The Granary Burying Ground, established in 1660, holds the remains of Paul Revere, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, and the victims of the Boston Massacre. But the official count of 2,345 graves is a lie. Historians estimate over 8,000 bodies are actually buried there. During centuries of burials, grave diggers routinely dug up old remains and scattered or destroyed them to make room for new customers. Entire families were buried in unmarked mass graves. The ground you walk on contains countless forgotten souls. 36. The Great Brinks Robbery. On January 17, 1950, 11 men wearing navy peacoats, chauffeur caps, and Halloween masks walked into the Brinks Armored Car Depot in Boston's North End and stole $2.7 million in cash and securities. It was the largest robbery in American history at the time, and it took the FBI 6 years to solve it. The gang was caught just 11 days before the statute of limitations would have expired. They called it the crime of the century, and it happened just blocks from Paul Revere's house. 35. The Boston Strangler. Between June 1962 and January 1964, 13 women were sexually assaulted and strangled in the Boston area. The victims ranged in age from 19 to 85. All were found in their apartments with no signs of forced entry. The killer left his calling card. Their bodies posed, often with a bow tied around their necks using their own stockings. The city was paralyzed with fear. Women bought guard dogs. Hardware stores sold out of locks. Boston became a city under siege. 34. The Confession. In 1965, a man named Albert DeSalvo confessed to being the Boston Strangler while confined at Bridgewater State Hospital for unrelated sexual assaults. DeSalvo provided detailed information about the murders that only the killer could know, but he was never tried for the Strangler killings. Instead, he was convicted of earlier sexual assaults and sentenced to life. In 1973, he was stabbed to death in his prison cell. The identity of his killer was never conclusively proven. 33. The DNA Twist. For decades, many questioned whether DeSalvo was really the Strangler. Then, in 2013, investigators exhumed his body and compared his DNA to evidence from the final victim, 19-year-old Mary Sullivan. It was a match. But here's the unsettling part. The DNA only definitively links DeSalvo to one murder. Some investigators believe there may have been multiple stranglers operating in Boston during those terrifying years. The truth may never be fully known. 32. The Strangler's Brother. Albert DeSalvo's brother Richard has spent decades insisting that Albert falsely confessed to the Strangler murders to protect someone else. Richard claims Albert told him, "I'm not the Strangler. I know who it is." Before his death, Albert allegedly wanted to reveal the real killer's identity, but was murdered before he could testify. The identity of Albert's prison killer remained officially unsolved for decades, though inmates reportedly knew who did it. 31. The Strangler's Legacy. The Boston Strangler changed how Americans lived. Before the murders, it was common for women to leave their doors unlocked, especially for maintenance workers and delivery men. The Strangler exploited this trust. After the killings, deadbolts became standard. Peepholes were installed in millions of doors. The phrase, "Don't open the door for strangers," became a national mantra. Boston's terror reshaped American home security forever. Before continuing, be sure to subscribe and leave a like to keep discovering the strange and incredible secrets of America's most fascinating cities. 30. The Molasses Disaster. On January 15, 1919, a 50-foot-tall steel tank containing 2.3 million gallons of molasses exploded in Boston's North End. The wave of molasses, estimated at 25 to 40 feet high, traveled at 35 miles per hour through the streets. It destroyed buildings, lifted a train off its tracks, and killed 21 people. The pressure was so intense it bent steel support beams of the elevated railway. Rescue workers found victims, horses, and debris cemented into the hardening syrup. 29. The Molasses Wave. The physics of the molasses flood were nightmarish. Unlike water, molasses is a non-Newtonian fluid that becomes more viscous under pressure. As victims struggled, the molasses gripped them tighter. Some drowned standing up, unable to move their arms or legs. The flood destroyed the North End paving yard firehouse, killing several firefighters. One city employee was found dead in his office, still seated at his desk, entombed in hardened molasses. 28. The Trial of the Century. The lawsuit that followed the molasses disaster was unprecedented. Over 100 plaintiffs sued the United States Industrial Alcohol Company, owner of the tank. The trial lasted 6 years and involved 3,000 witnesses and 45,000 pages of testimony. Engineers testified that the tank had been poorly constructed and never properly tested. The company was found negligent and paid settlements equivalent to over $15 million today. It established corporate liability standards still used in American law. 27. The smell that lingered for decades after the disaster, residents claim they could still smell molasses on hot summer days. The sticky substance had seeped into the porous brick and cobblestones of the North End. Some said the harbor water remained brown for months. Today, locals insist that on particularly warm days, you can still catch a faint whiff of sweetness near the site. Whether fact or legend, the Great Molasses Flood left a mark on Boston that is never fully washed away. 26. The Prohibition Connection. Why was there a tank holding 2.3 million gallons of molasses in the middle of Boston? The answer: rum. Molasses is the key ingredient in rum production, and the Purity Distilling Company was racing to convert as much molasses as possible into alcohol before Prohibition took effect. The 18th Amendment had been ratified just the day before the disaster. Some historians believe the company's rush to process inventory before the ban contributed to the tank's catastrophic failure. 25. The coffin ships. Between 1845 and 1852, over 100,000 Irish immigrants fleeing the Great Famine arrived in Boston. The conditions on the ships were so horrific they were called coffin ships. 1 in 5 passengers died during the voyage. Those who survived arrived diseased and starving at a city that didn't want them. Signs reading, "No Irish need apply," appeared in shop windows. The Irish were considered the lowest class of immigrants, crowded into slums worse than those they had fled. 24. Fort Hill. The Fort Hill neighborhood became Boston's first Irish ghetto. Families of 10 or more crowded into single rooms. Cholera and typhus were constant threats. Mortality rates were higher than in the worst slums of London. In 1849, the neighborhood's death rate was 4 times higher than the rest of Boston. An 1849 city report described conditions as a perfect hive of human beings without comforts and mostly without common necessaries. The entire neighborhood was eventually demolished. 23. The first Irish mayor, Hugh O'Brien, became Boston's first Irish-born mayor in 1885, nearly 40 years after the famine immigration began. The Irish had transformed from despised immigrants to a political force through sheer numbers and organization. By 1900, the Irish controlled Boston politics almost completely. The famous quote, "Vote early and vote often," is attributed to Boston's Irish political machines. Names like Fitzgerald, Kennedy, and Curley would define Boston politics for the next century. 22. The Rascal King. James Michael Curley served 4 terms as mayor, 1 term as governor, and 2 terms in Congress, all while being one of the most corrupt politicians in American history. He was elected mayor while under federal indictment and served part of his 4th term from federal prison for mail fraud. Yet the working-class Irish of Boston loved him. When he died in 1958, over 1 million people lined the streets for his funeral. His life inspired the novel and film The Last Hurrah. 21. The Southie Code. South Boston, or Southie, became synonymous with Irish-American identity and a code of silence that protected everyone from children to criminals. The neighborhood was so insular that outsiders were viewed with immediate suspicion. Residents famously refused to cooperate with police investigations even when they knew the perpetrators. This code of silence would later protect one of America's most wanted criminals for 16 years. 20. The Winter Hill Gang. The Winter Hill Gang, based in Somerville, just outside Boston, was one of the most powerful organized crime groups in American history. Originally led by Howie Winter, the gang controlled gambling, loan sharking, and drug trafficking throughout New England. In the 1970s, leadership passed to two men who would become infamous: James Whitey Bulger and Stephen the Rifleman Fleming. Together, they would orchestrate one of the most corrupt partnerships in FBI history. 19. The FBI's Informant. In 1975, FBI agent John Connolly recruited Whitey Bulger as an informant. The arrangement was supposed to help the FBI take down the Italian mafia in Boston. Instead, Bulger used his FBI protection to eliminate his competition and build a criminal empire. Connolly and other agents tipped Bulger off to investigations, allowed him to commit murders, and actively covered up his crimes. One FBI supervisor later said the Bureau had sold its soul to Whitey Bulger. 18. The Body Count. Whitey Bulger is believed responsible for at least 19 murders, though the actual number may be much higher. Victims were shot, strangled, and stabbed. Some were buried in basements. Others were dumped in the marshes outside Boston. One victim, Deborah Davis, was the girlfriend of Bulger's partner, Stephen Fleming. She was strangled after learning too much about their operations. Her body wasn't found for decades. 17. The 16-Year Hunt. In 1994, Whitey Bulger was tipped off by a corrupt FBI agent that he was about to be indicted. He disappeared and spent 16 years on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted list, second only to Osama bin Laden. While the FBI searched globally, Bulger was living quietly in Santa Monica, California, with his girlfriend Catherine Greig. He was finally captured in 2011 after an advertisement campaign targeted women who might recognize Greig. 16. The Alcatraz Connection. Before becoming Boston's most notorious gangster, Whitey Bulger served time in Alcatraz from 1959 to 1962. There, he was subjected to CIA-sponsored LSD experiments as part of the MK Ultra program, believing he was testing drugs to cure schizophrenia. Bulger later said the experiments changed him and may have contributed to his violent behavior. He was prisoner Darajir 1428 at America's most infamous prison before building his own criminal empire. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and allows us to keep creating content like this. Let's continue. 15. The Omni Parker House. The Omni Parker House, opened in 1855, is America's longest continuously operating hotel and possibly its most haunted. Founder Harvey Parker is said to still walk the 10th floor, checking on guests. The ghost of a 19th century actress named Charlotte Cushman haunts the 3rd floor. Room 303 is particularly active, with guests reporting orbs, flickering lights, and the smell of whiskey. Ho Chi Minh and Malcolm X both worked here as young men. Charles Dickens lived in room 338 while giving lectures. 14. The Boston Athenaeum Ghost. The Boston Athenaeum, one of America's oldest private libraries, has a permanent resident who refuses to leave. The ghost of Reverend Thaddeus Mason Harris, who died in 1842, has been spotted reading in his favorite chair in the 5th floor reading room. Staff report books flying off shelves and mysterious footsteps in the rare book room. Nathaniel Hawthorne, a member, was inspired to write The Scarlet Letter after encountering strange phenomena here. 13. The Central Burying Ground. The central burying ground at Boston Common is home to over 5,000 burials, including many who died during the British siege of Boston. Artist Gilbert Stuart, who painted the most famous portrait of George Washington, is buried here in an unmarked grave. But the most disturbing fact: when the Boylston Street subway station was built in 1897, workers uncovered over 900 bodies that had been buried outside the cemetery's official boundaries. They were reinterred in a mass grave beneath the common. 12. The Boston Massacre Site. Outside the old State House, a circle of cobblestones marks the spot where 5 colonists fell during the Boston Massacre. Late at night, visitors report hearing phantom gunshots, screaming, and the sound of a crowd in panic. Some have photographed orbs and shadow figures in the area. In March, around the anniversary of the massacre, paranormal activity reportedly intensifies. The spirits of Crispus Attucks, Samuel Gray, James Caldwell, Samuel Maverick, and Patrick Carr may still linger where they died. 11. The Charles Gate Hotel. The Charles Gate Hotel, built in 1891, has been a luxury apartment building, a Boston University dormitory, and a haven for paranormal activity. During its years as a dormitory, students reported seeing a woman in white floating through hallways, elevators operating on their own, and blood-curdling screams coming from empty rooms. Multiple students reported being physically touched by invisible hands. Some refused to live on certain floors. The building is now luxury condominiums, but residents still report unexplained phenomena. 10. The Curse of the Bambino. In 1920, Red Sox owner Harry Frazee sold Babe Ruth to the New York Yankees for $100,000. Before the sale, the Red Sox had won 5 World Series. After the sale, they wouldn't win another for 86 years. Meanwhile, the Yankees won 26 championships. The Curse of the Bambino became Boston's defining sports tragedy. Generations grew up believing their team was literally cursed. The phrase, "wait till next year," became a bitter Boston tradition. 9. The 1986 Heartbreak. Nothing embodied the curse like Game 6 of the 1986 World Series. The Red Sox were one strike away from winning their first championship since 1918. Then a routine ground ball went through first baseman Bill Buckner's legs, allowing the Mets to score the winning run. The Red Sox lost the series. Buckner received death threats. He had to move his family out of Boston. For many fans, this was proof that the curse was real. 8. The curse is broken in 2004. The Red Sox did the impossible. Down 3-0 to the Yankees in the American League Championship Series, a deficit no team had ever overcome, they won 4 straight games. Then they swept the St. Louis Cardinals in the World Series, winning their first championship since 1918. Over 3 million people lined the streets of Boston for the victory parade. Fans visited cemeteries to tell deceased relatives the news. The 86-year nightmare was finally over. 7. The Bambino's Piano. Urban legend claims that before selling Babe Ruth, Harry Frazee dumped Ruth's favorite piano into Willis Pond in Sudbury to spite the player. For decades, treasure hunters searched for the piano, believing it contained clues to hidden wealth. In 2004, just months before the Red Sox finally won the World Series, a team actually found a piano at the bottom of the pond. However, experts determined it wasn't from Ruth's era. The timing was pure coincidence. Probably. 6. Fenway's Secrets. Fenway Park, built in 1912, is the oldest ballpark in Major League Baseball. The famous green monster in left field is 37 feet tall because the street behind it couldn't be moved. Inside the scoreboard, operators still changed the score by hand, using 13-pound metal numbers. There's a red seat in the right field bleachers marking where Ted Williams hit the longest home run in Fenway history, 502 feet. Beneath the stands, there are rooms that haven't been opened in decades. 5. The Big Dig. The Central Artery Tunnel project, known as the Big Dig, was the most expensive highway project in American history. It replaced Boston's elevated highway with an underground tunnel system, took 16 years to complete, and cost $24.3 billion, roughly $8 billion over budget. At its peak, 5,000 workers were on site daily. Engineers had to dig beneath buildings, subway lines, and the harbor while keeping the city running. The project moved 16 million cubic yards of dirt. 4. The Big Dig disaster. On July 10, 2006, a 12-ton concrete ceiling panel in the I-90 connector tunnel fell onto a car, killing 38-year-old Milena Del Valle. The collapse revealed systemic problems with the Big Dig's construction. Investigators found that the epoxy adhesive holding the ceiling panels had been improperly applied throughout the tunnel system. The contractor paid $450 million in settlement, the largest construction settlement in state history. The Big Dig's legacy became one of tragedy as much as achievement. 3. The Gardner Museum heist. On March 18, 1990, two men dressed as police officers entered the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum at 1:24 a.m. They handcuffed the security guards, spent 81 minutes inside, and left with 13 works of art valued at $500 million. Stolen pieces included Vermeer's The Concert, Rembrandt's Storm on the Sea of Galilee, and works by Degas and Manet. The frames still hang empty awaiting the art's return. A $10 million reward remains unclaimed. It is the largest unsolved art theft in history. 2. The Marathon bombing. On April 15, 2013, two pressure cooker bombs exploded near the finish line of the Boston Marathon, killing 3 and injuring over 260. The 4-day manhunt that followed shut down the entire city. MIT police officer Sean Collier was shot and killed. The suspects engaged police in a firefight in Watertown. One bomber died, the other was found hiding in a boat. The phrase, "Boston Strong," became a symbol of the city's resilience. Survivors crossed the finish line the following year. 1. The city that refuses to forget. Here is the ultimate truth about Boston. This city has witnessed the birth of a nation, the terror of a strangler, the flood of molasses, the corruption of gangsters, and the heartbreak of curses. Its streets are paved with the bones of colonists, immigrants, and victims. Its buildings are haunted by the ghosts of those who built them. But Boston doesn't run from its history. The cobblestones of the Freedom Trail guide millions past sites of revolution and tragedy alike. The empty frames at the Gardner Museum remind visitors that mysteries remain unsolved. The curse that haunted generations became the triumph that united them. From the coffin ships to the finish line, from Whitey Bulger's reign to the Big Dig's tunnels, Boston is a city built on contradictions. It's proud and corrupt, academic and criminal, haunted and hopeful. Every brick, every cobblestone, every subway tunnel holds a story. Boston doesn't forget its past. It walks on it every single day. And maybe that's why, after 400 years, it's still standing. Because a city that remembers everything is a city that learns from everything. And that is the truth about Boston. And there you have it. 40 facts about Boston you probably didn't know. From secret underground floods to unsolved museum heists, from serial killers to FBI corruption, from baseball curses to Big Dig disasters, Boston is so much more than Harvard and lobster rolls. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next videos. Let us know in the comments which fact surprised you the most and what city you want us to explore next. This has been Urban Vault. See you in the next one.